Hello, everyone. I'm here today to talk about different cognitive biases, and the first cognitive bias that I'd like to shed some light on is catharsis. Catharsis comes from the ancient Greek times, where philosophers like Plato and Aristotle and Sophocles were around, and essentially what catharsis is, it's basically the process of releasing and providing a sort of relief for emotional distress or stress in general. And it's like, in easier terms to explain, it's basically just removing unhappy memories from inside your brain or your thought process and replacing them with better memories or something or anything, just, and even if it's neutral, to just block out all those bad memories so you won't be feeling any you know disbelief or stress. And the way this theory came to be is, the certain philosophers in the time of the Greek period, they noticed how through medias like art or tragic plays that the Greeks were definitely known for, or especially in the Renaissance period with like different things like Shakespeare and stuff like that. This thing that they termed catharsis was basically the people's way of finding a sort of stress relief in those medias. And a perfect example of that is how in tragedies the tragic hero has to go through certain trials. He's seen as morally good, yet most of the time seen as like a perfect individual, and towards the end of the story they're met with like a very tragic and unfortunate event, and what this leaves the audience feeling is catharsis. They're feeling that when they see this tragedy happen to this morally good character, they're met with a sense of relief that that character isn't them. They're not in that character's position. So that's basically where the catharsis comes into play. That thought of, this could be me, but it's not, and I'm in a position where I'm not in the as bad of a spot as this tragic hero is. So basically, by watching these plays or seeing this art that could help you relieve your stress, you're basically taking the unhappy thoughts, like I said earlier, and throwing them out and replacing them with better things and sometimes happy things. Because in Greek art, it's very, tasteful. There's always Greek times in general, they're basically met with like a lot of social interaction. Everyone's together, they're all as a unit. So if anyone's feeling like stress or disbelief, this is why they had those things such as art and tragedies. And also, the good example would be like the Colosseum. People would watch warriors and all these gladiators go through the different trials for people's entertainment. It de-stresses them. They watch the showing, and the catharsis would happen. They just get a kick out of a whole bunch of stuff. And that's basically what the gist of the catharsis theory is. Next cognitive bias I'd like to shed some light on is the enclosed cognition bias. And essentially what the enclosed cognition bias is when the clothes or even shoes that you're wearing have a sort of effect on our thought process and our mind, and it basically makes whatever job or however we feel just better and more efficient. And an example of this would be how scientists, for example, or nurses and doctors, the lab coat that the scientist wears would affect the job that they're doing and make it more proficient and more accurate. And the same thing with the nurse and the doctor with their scrubs, and the doctor with the scrubs plus the lab coat. And studies have shown how scientists who work in labs with a lab coat and with goggles for protection and other stuff like that, they end up doing a much better job at what they're doing than a scientist without a lab coat or any other protection for their studies and experiments like that. And another way enclosed cognition affects people other than the workforce and stuff like that is just with our everyday lives. Society nowadays has built this kind of stigma that if you don't wear certain clothing brands or expensive clothing items like expensive shoes or certain brand of clothing for like t-shirts or stuff nowadays, that you're not fitting the standard of how everyone else around us is dressing. So let's say a male knows that certain shoe that he's wearing will be met with certain appraise by his peers or people around them, since everyone around is buzzing around this certain shoe, and he'll just feel more lively in general because of it. Another example being how, for let's say a sweet 16 or a wedding or a prom, girls tend to feel more elegant and more like fancy or approachable when it comes to the dresses they wear. How certain dresses are very like princess like, and they'll feel more comfortable in their own skin and enjoy their time better, as opposed to a person who comes to like one of these events and a dress that's not very fitting to their style, or something that's not even a dress, like maybe casual wear. They'll feel kind of left out in the situation, and they won't feel as comfortable in comparison with the ladies who do wear the extravagant prom dresses. And that's basically what enclosed cognition is all about. Well, the third cognitive bias that I'd like to shed some light on is the misattribution of arousal. And in order to get an understanding of what this theory is, you have to understand what the meaning of arousal is. And arousal is the feeling of being aroused is essentially the feeling of excitement in a sexual way towards another person or an object at times, or any other thing that just makes someone feel excited in general. And the symptoms of being aroused are, increased heart rate, sweaty palms, the feeling of nervousness, dry mouth, big breath at times. All those other things that we all know the feeling of arousal makes us. And the misattribution of arousal is when an individual is encountered in a certain situation with either a person or something just that's happening towards them, and they end up feeling this feeling of arousal, and they in their mind they process it as being aroused at this one certain thing that they think that they're focused on, but but when it comes down to it, that feeling that they think they're being aroused in is actually not what they're being aroused over, and there's a second party being involved that is the thing that's actually making them aroused. And a study done by scientists who go by the name of Dutton and Aaron conducted this experiment where they put two test subjects, the one attractive female scientist on one end of a scary bridge, and the male who was being experimented on the other side. And essentially what they did is they asked the male participant to try to go up to the female on the other side of this scary bridge and see how their arousal levels would increase from being on that bridge. And it turns out that they were more aroused as in comparison to another time where the test subject was on a different bridge that was safer, and they essentially both did the same things. And what this experiment is basically trying to shed light on is the fact that the male ended up feeling more aroused on that scary bridge than he was on the bridge that was safer. And the reasoning behind that is the sense of the excitement he had on that scary bridge, because there's more going on for it. Like, there's more at risk, there's more at stake in order for this male individual to end up going to the female scientist at the end of the bridge. And that's basically the sort of gist on the misattribution of arousal. Again, you have one thing that you think you're being aroused over, but then in reality, it's not what's making you feel aroused, it's this other thing in the way, and your mind just doesn't process it that way, and you end up feeling aroused, or end up thinking you feel aroused over the one that you're not. And that's essentially what misattribution of arousal is. Thank you all for listening to my understanding and presentation on the different cognitive biases. If you have any feedback you'd like to give me, please comment below and let me know how I did, please. Thank you all so much, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye.